The morning sun peeked through the cracks of the aging blinds in Marissa Carter's small apartment. She sighed as she leaned over the kitchen counter, calculating her grocery list for the week. Every dollar mattered. And as a single mom to her 9-year-old daughter, Lily, she knew how to stretch a dime. The 2-bedroom apartment wasn't much, but Marissa worked tirelessly as a waitress at a local diner to ensure Lily had a warm bed and a full belly. This Saturday, Marissa had just finished her shift, her feet aching from the lunch rush. She picked Lily up from her neighbor Mrs. Hargrove, who often babysat, and they began their weekly routine of taking the bus downtown. It was one of the few splurges Marissa allowed herself to take Lily to the library for story hour, and, if the budget allowed, a small ice cream cone afterward. As they approached the bus stop, Marissa noticed a young boy sitting on the bench, his head down and his thin jacket doing little to shield him from the brisk wind. His sneakers were worn, his backpack tattered, and there was a nervous energy about him as he fiddled with the strap of his bag. He couldn't have been older than 17. "Are you all right?" Marissa asked gently, her motherly instincts kicking in. The boy looked up, startled, his brown eyes wide and uncertain. I'm fine," he stammered, though the tremble in his voice suggested otherwise. "You waiting for the bus?" she asked. "Yeah," but he hesitated. "I don't have enough for the fare. I was hoping someone might, help." Marissa glanced at her wallet. She had just enough for her and Lily's bus fare and the ice cream they had promised themselves. But something about the boy's hunched shoulders and defeated look tugged at her heart. Without a second thought, she reached into her purse, pulled out a few crumpled bills and handed them to him. "Here," she said. "That should cover it." The boy's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Really? Are you sure?" Marissa smiled. "Positive. Where are you headed?" "I'm trying to get to the other side of town. My parents, they're out of town, and I need to get back home," he said, though his words sounded rehearsed, almost as if he was trying to avoid telling the whole truth. Marissa didn't press further. "Take care of yourself, okay?" As the bus rolled up, Marissa and Lily boarded alongside the boy. He thanked her again before sitting several rows back. Marissa thought that was the end of it, a small, kind gesture that might have made his day a little easier. Little did she know, the boy's story was far more complicated, and this chance encounter would soon ripple into her life in ways she could never have imagined. The bus ride downtown was quiet. Lily chatted about her favorite books, her little voice filling the space between them. Marissa listened with a smile, her mind still lingering on the boy. She couldn't shake the feeling that he needed more help than he let on. When they arrived at the library, she saw him again. He stood at the corner of the street, staring at a payphone, as though debating whether to use it. He was clutching his backpack tightly, looking even more lost than before. "Mommy, is that the boy you gave the money to?" Lily asked, pointing. Marissa nodded, her heart sinking. Something wasn't right. She walked over, Lily trailing behind. "Hey," she said softly, "are you sure you're okay? You don't have to tell me everything, but if you need help, I'm here." The boy's shoulders slumped. "I don't want to bother you more than I already have," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not a bother," Marissa said firmly. "Come on. Let's get out of the cold." She led him into the library, where they found a quiet corner to sit. He introduced himself as Ethan. Slowly, the story spilled out. He wasn't just stranded. He had run away from home. His parents were wealthy, but he felt invisible in their sprawling mansion, surrounded by nannies and tutors while they traveled for work. He had wanted to prove he could make it on his own, but things hadn't gone as planned. His parents thought he was with a friend for the weekend, but in truth he'd spent 2 nights on the streets, too proud to call them for help. Marissa listened intently, her heart breaking for the boy. She didn't know what it was like to grow up rich, but she knew what it felt like to be alone and unsure of where to turn. "Ethan," she said, "I'm going to help you figure this out." They spent the rest of the afternoon together. Marissa used what little cash she had left to buy Ethan a sandwich and hot chocolate from the library cafe. She didn't know how, but she was determined to get him back to his family, or at least make sure he had a safe place to go. As the day wore on, Marissa realized something the boy needed more than a bus fare. He needed someone to care, even if just for a little while, and in that moment she decided she would be that someone. The library had grown quieter as the afternoon turned to early evening. Marissa watched Ethan as he slowly ate the sandwich she'd bought for him. His fingers trembled slightly as he held the paper cup of hot chocolate, and his face softened as the warmth seemed to settle over him. Lily had plopped herself in the children's section nearby, her small frame nestled between the bookshelves. Marissa glanced at her and then back at Ethan. "Do your parents know you're gone?" she asked gently. He hesitated, looking down at the table. "They don't even know I'm missing," he said after a moment. "They think I'm with my friend Josh. I told them I'd be staying the weekend at his house." Marissa frowned, her mind racing. "Ethan, I get that you're upset with them, but don't you think they're worried about you?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "I doubt it. They probably wouldn't even notice until Monday when I'm supposed to be back at school. They're always busy meetings, events, traveling. I'm like an afterthought." Marissa's heart ached. She had no idea what it was like to live in a big, lavish house, but she knew what it felt like to crave love and attention. She had grown up in foster care, bouncing from home to home, always longing for someone to see her, to value her. Now, as a mother, she had promised herself she would never let Lily feel that way. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but firm, "it's okay to feel hurt, but you don't have to do this alone. Running away won't fix anything. Trust me, I know." Ethan glanced at her, his eyes searching hers as if trying to decide whether to believe her. "You don't even know me," he said quietly. "Why are you being so nice?" Marissa smiled gently. "Because I've been where you are. And because everyone deserves someone to look out for them, even if it's just for a moment." Before he could respond, Lily came running over, clutching a book in her hands. "Mommy, look. They have the one I was telling you about." Marissa chuckled, pulling Lily into her lap. "That's great, sweetheart. Go pick out a couple more, and then we'll check them out." Lily beamed, darting back toward the shelves. Ethan watched her, a wistful look on his face. "She's lucky," he said softly. "Why's that?" Marissa asked. "She has you," Ethan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Marissa felt a lump form in her throat. She reached out and placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "You deserve that, too," she said. "And I think your parents love you more than you realize. Maybe they just don't know how to show it." Ethan didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. For the first time since they'd met, the hard edge in his demeanor softened, replaced by a glimmer of vulnerability. As the library prepared to close, Marissa knew they couldn't leave Ethan to fend for himself. She wasn't sure what the right move was, but she couldn't let him go back to the streets. "You can stay with us tonight," she said, her voice steady. "It's not much, but it's warm. And you'll be safe." Ethan hesitated, his pride warring with his exhaustion. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, thank you." The bus ride back to Marissa's apartment was quiet. Lily chattered about the books she had borrowed, while Ethan stared out the window, lost in thought. When they arrived, Marissa made him a makeshift bed on the couch and handed him a clean blanket. "I'll call your parents tomorrow," she said, trying to gauge his reaction. "We'll figure this out together." Ethan tensed but nodded reluctantly. "All right," he said, "tomorrow." That night, as Marissa lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. She had only met him a few hours ago, yet she felt a deep sense of responsibility for him. He was just a kid, lost and scared, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. In the living room, Ethan stared up at the ceiling, the soft hum of the heater filling the silence. He thought about Marissa's kindness, about the way she had treated him like he mattered, even though they were practically strangers. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in days, he let himself close his eyes, knowing he wasn't alone. Morning came with the sound of Lily's giggles as she played with her stuffed animals on the living room floor. The smell of coffee and scrambled eggs wafted through the small apartment, and Ethan stirred awake to the unfamiliar but comforting hum of a family morning. Marissa was at the stove wearing an oversized sweatshirt and pulling her hair back into a loose ponytail. She glanced over at Ethan as he sat up on the couch, his hair tousled from sleep. "Good morning," she said with a warm smile. "How do you like your eggs?" Ethan blinked, surprised by the casual hospitality. Scrambled is fine," he mumbled. She nodded, plating the food and setting it on the small dining table. "Come eat. You've got a big day ahead." Lily joined them, chattering about her plans to read all her new library books. Ethan watched her, a small smile tugging at his lips. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen such unfiltered joy. As they ate, Marissa brought up the elephant in the room. "Ethan, I meant what I said last night. We need to call your parents." Ethan stiffened, his fork hovering over his plate. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." Marissa leaned forward, her expression gentle but firm. "I know it's scary, but they're probably worried sick about you. And even if they don't show it the way you want them to, they deserve to know you're safe." Ethan sighed, his shoulders slumping. "What if they don't care? What if they're just mad at me?" "Then we'll deal with that together," Marissa said. "But I have a feeling they care more than you think." After breakfast, Marissa handed Ethan the cordless phone. He stared at it for a long moment before dialing. His hands trembled as it rang, and when a woman's voice answered, his throat tightened. "Mom?" "It's me," he said, his voice barely audible. There was a long pause before the voice on the other end erupted into a flurry of emotion. "Ethan? Oh my God, Ethan, where are you? Are you okay? We've been worried sick." Ethan blinked, his grip on the phone tightening. I'm okay, I just needed to get away for a bit." His mother's voice wavered between relief and frustration. "Why didn't you tell us? We thought something terrible had happened." Marissa stayed nearby, giving Ethan a reassuring nod. Lily, sensing the tension, quietly colored at the coffee table, her presence a calming backdrop. "I didn't think you'd notice," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking. "You and Dad are always so busy. I just felt invisible." His mother was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her tone was softer. "Ethan, I'm so sorry you felt that way. We never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter. I know we're not perfect, but you're our son and we love you more than anything." Ethan's eyes filled with tears, and he quickly wiped them away, not wanting to cry in front of Marissa and Lily. "I'm at a friend's place," he said. "I'm safe." "We're coming to get you," his mother said firmly. "Tell me where you are." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Marissa. She nodded, giving him the go-ahead. He relayed the address, and his mother promised they'd be there as soon as possible. When the call ended, Ethan set the phone down, his hands still shaking. "They're coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marissa sat down next to him. "How do you feel?" He took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "Scared. But maybe a little relieved." Marissa gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "It's going to be okay. You did the right thing." The hours passed slowly as they waited. Ethan helped Lily with her coloring, his nervous energy easing as her cheerful chatter filled the room. Marissa stayed busy tidying up, though she kept an eye on Ethan, ready to step in if he needed support. Finally, there was a knock at the door. Ethan froze, his face a mix of anticipation and fear. Marissa walked over and opened it, revealing a tall, well-dressed woman and a man who looked equally polished but visibly shaken. The woman's eyes landed on Ethan, and she let out a choked sob. "Ethan," she breathed, rushing forward to wrap him in a tight embrace. "I was so scared. Don't ever do this to us again." The man followed, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. We've been looking everywhere for you, son. Are you all right? Ethan nodded, his voice catching in his throat. I'm okay. The reunion was raw and emotional, and Marissa stepped back to give them privacy. When Ethan's mother turned to her, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you for taking care of him. We don't even know how to repay you. Marissa smiled warmly. He's a good kid. I'm just glad he's safe. As Ethan prepared to leave, he turned to Marissa. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything. Marissa pulled him into a hug. You're going to be okay. Just don't forget you matter. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I won't. As he walked out the door with his parents, Marissa felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had only been a small part of Ethan's journey, but she knew her kindness had made a difference. And as she turned back to Lily, who was waiting with a bright smile, she felt a renewed sense of hope in the power of compassion. The apartment felt quiet after Ethan and his parents left. Marissa sat on the couch, sipping her coffee while Lily happily flipped through one of her library books. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the room, but Marissa couldn't shake the thoughts running through her mind. She kept wondering about Ethan, whether his parents would really make an effort to bridge the emotional gap he had described. She hoped they would. The rawness of their reunion had seemed genuine, but Marissa knew that intentions could easily falter without action. She thought of her own struggles raising Lily, of how much she wished she could provide more, and yet how much love she poured into the life they shared. That love was what mattered most. Later that evening, as she tidied up the kitchen, a soft knock came at the door. Frowning, she glanced at the clock. It was late for visitors. She opened the door cautiously, surprised to find a man standing there in a tailored suit. He looked slightly out of place in the worn-down hallway of her apartment building. "Ms. Carter?" he asked politely. "Yes," Marissa replied, unsure. "I'm Gerald," he said, extending a hand. "I work for the Finches, Ethan's family. May I come in?" Marissa hesitated but nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Gerald surveyed the modest apartment with an unreadable expression before sitting on the edge of the couch. Marissa joined him, her curiosity piqued. "First, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Finches," he began. "You went above and beyond to help Ethan when he was vulnerable, and for that they are incredibly grateful." Marissa smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything special. He just needed someone to care." Gerald's lips curved into a small smile. "Well, your actions made an impact. Mr. and Mrs. Finch have asked me to deliver a personal message, as well as something to show their gratitude." He handed her a sleek envelope. Marissa opened it, revealing a handwritten note from Ethan's mother. It was heartfelt, expressing their deep thanks and a promise to work on being more present for their son. Beneath the note was a check. When Marissa saw the amount, her breath caught in her throat. I can't take this," she stammered, pushing the check back toward Gerald. "This is too much." Gerald shook his head. "The Finches insisted. They see it as a way to not only thank you but also to invest in your future and your daughters. They know you've been struggling, and they hope this will make things a little easier." Marissa looked at the check again, her emotions swirling. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life, enough to pay off debts, move into a better neighborhood, and provide Lily with opportunities she had only dreamed of. But she felt conflicted. She hadn't helped Ethan for any kind of reward. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. "I didn't help him expecting anything in return," she said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure he was safe." "And you did," Gerald replied. "The Finches understand that. This isn't about repayment, it's about gratitude and trust. They trust that you'll use this to create a better life for yourself and your daughter." Marissa sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on her. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but please let them know how much this means to me and that I'll use it wisely." I'll be sure to pass that along, Gerald said, standing. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. After he left, Marissa sat at the kitchen table, staring at the check. Lily came over, climbing onto her lap. "What's that, Mommy?" she asked, her big eyes curious. Marissa kissed the top of her head. "It's a blessing, sweetheart. A really big blessing." The days that followed were filled with planning. Marissa carefully mapped out how to use the money not just for immediate needs but for the long term. She found a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, one with a park where Lily could play. She enrolled Lily in a new school that offered more resources and extracurricular activities. And for herself, she signed up for online courses, reigniting a dream she had long set aside to become a nurse. Through it all, Marissa couldn't stop thinking about how her life had changed because of a small act of kindness. It was humbling and inspiring all at once. She knew that the real reward wasn't the money, it was the reminder that the smallest gestures could lead to the most profound changes. One evening, as she tucked Lily into bed in their new apartment, Lily looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Mommy, are we happy now?" Marissa smiled, her heart full. "Yes, sweetheart, we're very happy." And in her heart, she knew they weren't just happy, they were building something beautiful, one small step at a time. The check from the Finches had been for $50,000. It was an overwhelming amount, more than Marissa had ever dared to imagine in her hands. It wasn't enough to make her rich, but it was enough to transform her life and give her a chance to dream again. Over the next few weeks, Marissa worked tirelessly to make the most of this unexpected gift. She paid off the lingering credit card debt that had loomed over her for years, an ever-present reminder of hard times. She used part of the money to secure a modest but beautiful apartment in a safer part of town. The new place had a small balcony where Marissa could sit in the mornings with her coffee and watch Lily play in the courtyard below. Marissa also used the funds to enroll in an accelerated nursing program at the local community college. Becoming a nurse had always been her dream, but life had pushed that dream to the back burner. Now, with the money acting as a cushion, she could afford the tuition and still work part-time at the diner to cover everyday expenses. Lily thrived in her new environment. Her new school had better resources, more books, and a kind teacher who recognized Lily's love for reading and nurtured it. For the first time in her life, Lily had a backyard to run around in, and she quickly made friends with the other children in their building. Despite the whirlwind of changes, Marissa often found herself reflecting on Ethan. She hadn't heard from him or his family since Gerald's visit, but she hoped things were improving for him. The memory of his vulnerability and their shared moments in the library stayed with her. She often wondered if Ethan had begun to feel the love his parents had promised to show him. One crisp Saturday morning, as Marissa and Lily were settling into their new routine, there was a knock at the door. Marissa opened it to find Ethan standing there, smiling nervously. He was dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, but his hair was neatly combed and he looked healthier than she remembered. "Ethan," Marissa exclaimed, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to say thank you," Ethan said, holding out a small bouquet of wildflowers. "And I wanted to see how you and Lily are doing." Marissa took the flowers, her heart swelling. "Come in. Lily will be so happy to see you." Lily's face lit up when she saw Ethan. She ran over and threw her arms around him as though he were an old friend. The three of them sat down in the living room, and Ethan shared how things had changed since that day at the library. "My parents are trying," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "They're home more, and we've started doing family dinners. It's still weird, but it's better. I guess I didn't realize how much they cared until I saw how scared they were to lose me." Marissa smiled. "I'm so glad, Ethan. You deserve that." Ethan looked around the cozy apartment, taking in the cheerful space filled with Lily's books and drawings pinned to the walls. "This place is nice," he said. Did the money help?" "It changed everything," Marissa admitted. "But not just because of the money. Meeting you reminded me of how much good there still is in the world. It gave me the courage to dream again." Ethan looked down, a small smile playing on his lips. "You gave me that courage too. You helped me believe that someone could care, even when I felt like nobody did." They talked for hours, catching up on the past few weeks. When Ethan finally left, Marissa felt a deep sense of peace. She knew now that her kindness had set off a chain of events that changed not just her life but Ethan's as well. As the months turned into years, Marissa completed her nursing program, securing a job at a local hospital. Her life wasn't without challenges, but she faced them with a renewed sense of purpose and optimism. She and Lily often talked about Ethan, and though they didn't see him often, he remained a cherished part of their story. One day, when Lily was a teenager and Marissa had saved enough to buy a small home of their own, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Ethan. In it, he wrote about how he was now in college, studying to become a social worker. He wanted to help kids who felt as lost as he once had. Marissa read the letter aloud to Lily, tears in her eyes. "See, sweetheart? One act of kindness can change everything." Lily smiled, hugging her mom tightly. "Just like you always tell me, Mommy. Small things make a big difference." And in that moment, Marissa realized that the ripple effects of her choice to help Ethan would continue for years to come, spreading out in ways she could never have imagined.